The farmer's boots crunched through snow nearly up to his knees as he trudged toward the barn that bitter evening, thinking only of the livestock that needed tending before the storm worsened. When he spotted something that made his heart stop, a crumpled figure in the drifts near his fence line, green skin stark against the white, frost already forming on her clothing. Peter Zimmerman dropped the bucket he had been carrying and ran, his breath clouding in the frigid air as his legs pumped through the deepening snow. The figure was not moving. As he drew closer, he could see it was an orc woman, her lips tinged blue, her body curled into itself in a futile attempt to preserve warmth. Ice crystals clung to her dark hair and the rough fabric of her torn cloak. Her eyes were closed, and for a terrible moment, Peter thought he was too late. He fell to his knees beside her, pressing his bare hand against her neck. Her skin was cold as stone, but beneath his fingers he felt the faintest flutter of a pulse. She was alive, but barely. "Hold on," he murmured, though he doubted she could hear him. Peter was a big man, broad-shouldered from years of farm work, and he used every ounce of that strength now as he scooped her into his arms. She was heavier than a human woman might have been, solid with muscle even in her weakened state, but he managed. Her head lolled against his chest as he carried her toward his house, moving as quickly as he dared through the snow. The warmth of his home hit him like a wall when he kicked open the door. The fire in the hearth was burning low, but it was enough. Peter carried the orc woman straight to the hearth and laid her down on the thick rug before the flames. Her breathing was shallow, barely visible even as he watched the rise and fall of her chest. He had to get her warm. Fast. Peter knew enough about cold exposure to understand that she needed more than just the fire. He needed to warm her gradually, and he needed to get her out of those frozen clothes. His hands trembled not from cold, but from the weight of what he was about to do. The scandal of it. An unmarried man, alone with an orc woman, undressing her. But she would die if he did not act. Peter worked quickly, his face burning despite the situation. He unfastened her cloak, stiff with ice, and peeled it away. Her tunic and trousers were nearly as bad, damp and frozen in places. He averted his eyes as much as he could, focusing on the practical necessity of the task, and wrapped her in every blanket and quilt he owned. Then he did something he had never imagined doing in his 32 years of life. He stripped down to his undershirt and trousers, lay down beside her beneath the blankets, and pulled her frozen body against his own. The shock of her cold skin against his nearly made him gasp, but he held her close, wrapping his arms around her and pressing her back against his chest. This was how you saved someone from freezing skin to skin contact, shared body heat. He had seen it done once, years ago, when a child had fallen through ice in winter. It worked then. It had to work now. Peter held the orc woman tight, rubbing her arms carefully, breathing against the back of her neck, willing his warmth into her body. The fire crackled beside them. Snow pelted against the windows. And slowly, so slowly, he felt her skin begin to lose that terrible stone-cold quality. He did not know how long they lay there. Long enough for the fire to need more wood, which he added without fully leaving her, pulling the blankets around her before he moved and tucking them back in when he returned. Long enough for the storm outside to howl itself into a white fury. Long enough for his arms to ache and his back to cramp. But finally, she stirred. It was just a small movement at first, a twitch of her fingers, a slight shift of her head. Then her breathing deepened, and Peter felt the exact moment consciousness began to return to her because her entire body went rigid. "Easy," he said softly, keeping his voice calm. "You are safe. You were freezing in the snow. I brought you inside." She tried to pull away, but she was too weak, and Peter kept his arms loose enough that she would not feel trapped. After a moment, the tension eased slightly from her frame. "Where?" Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "My farm, just outside Millbrook. You are by the fire. You are warming up." There was a long silence. He felt her breathing faster now, could sense her trying to make sense of her situation. "You are human," she said. "Yes." Another silence. "Why did you help me?" The question struck Peter as desperately sad. "Because you would have died," he said simply. "I could not leave you out there." She said nothing to that, but some of the rigidity left her body. Peter continued to hold her, continued to share his warmth, and eventually, exhaustion claimed her again, and she slipped back into sleep, a real sleep this time, not the terrible stillness of near death. Peter remained awake long into the night, keeping watch over her, keeping her warm and wondering what on earth he was going to do come morning. When dawn broke gray and cold over the snow-buried farm, Peter woke to find the orc woman's eyes open and watching him. They were amber-colored, he noticed, striking against her green skin. Her small tusks jutted up from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears were pressed back slightly, a sign of wariness he recognized from the few orcs he had seen at a distance over the years. They stared at each other for a long moment. "How do you feel?" Peter asked finally, cold but alive. Her voice was stronger now, though still rough. "You stayed with me all night. You needed the warmth. You put yourself between me and the fire. You gave me the better position." Peter felt his face heat. He had not thought about it at the time, had simply positioned them in the way that seemed most practical. "Does it matter?" "Yes." She held his gaze. "I am an orc. You are human. This is not done." "Well," Peter said, "it is done now." The corner of her mouth twitched, though it was not quite a smile. She tried to sit up, and Peter helped her, keeping the blankets wrapped around her shoulders. In the daylight, he could see her more clearly. She looked young, perhaps early 20s, with a strong jawline and high cheekbones. A scar crossed her left eyebrow. Her dark hair fell past her shoulders in tangled waves. "I am Kara," she said after a moment. "Kara of the Iron Peak clan, or I was. I do not know what I am now. Peter Zimmerman. And you are a woman who nearly froze to death in my north pasture. That is what you are now." He stood, wrapping a quilt around his own shoulders. "I will make breakfast. You need food. I should go." "Go where?" Peter gestured at the window, where snow was still falling in sheets. "The storm has not passed. Even if it had, you are in no condition to travel. You will stay until you are strong enough to leave. That is the end of it." Kara opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. She looked down at her hands, and Peter saw something like shame cross her features. "I have no way to repay you," she said quietly. "I am not asking for payment. I am asking you to eat some breakfast and rest." Peter moved to the kitchen area, stoking the cook stove and pulling out eggs and bread. "There is a spare room upstairs. The bed is decent. I will bring you some clean clothes. They will be too big, but better than your frozen ones." As he cooked, he felt her watching him. The silence was not entirely comfortable, heavy with all the unspoken questions between them, but it was not hostile either. When the food was ready, Peter brought her a plate and settled himself in a chair by the fire with his own. Kara ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, and he was glad to see it. Color was returning to her skin, the blue tinge gone from her lips. "Why were you out in the storm?" Peter asked when they had both finished eating. Kara's hands tightened on the empty plate. "I was cast out 3 days ago. My clan discovered that I had been leaving food for human refugees who passed near our territory. They called me a traitor to orc kind. I was told to leave and never return." Peter absorbed this. "So you were wandering alone?" "Yes. I thought I could reach the southern settlements before the worst of the winter hit, but the storm came earlier than expected. I got turned around in the snow. By the time I realized I was lost, I was too cold to keep walking." She looked up at him. I should have died out there. By all rights, I did die. You brought me back. Then I suppose you have a second chance at life, Peter said. What you do with it is up to you. Over the next few days, as the storm slowly blew itself out, an unusual routine established itself in Peter's home. Kara remained weak at first, and Peter made sure she ate regularly and stayed warm. He gave her the spare room as he had promised, and found her some of his older clothing that she could belt and roll to make fit. She looked strange in human clothes, but no stranger than the situation itself. Peter went about his daily work tending to the livestock, shoveling snow, chopping wood, and Kara watched him through the windows or from the doorway, wrapped in a quilt, slowly regaining her strength. On the third day, he came inside from the barn to find her standing at the cook stove, stirring a pot of stew. You should be resting, he said, stamping snow from his boots. I have been resting for 3 days. I am not useless. She glanced at him over her shoulder. You have been feeding me and housing me. The least I can do is cook a meal. Peter could not argue with that logic, though he worried she was pushing herself too soon. But the stew was better than his own cooking, truth be told, and as they ate together at his small table, he found the silence between them had shifted into something almost companionable. You live alone, Kara observed. It was not quite a question. Yes, I have for about 5 years now. Why? You are young enough. Most human men are married by your age, are they not? Peter shrugged. I was engaged once. She decided she did not want to be a farmer's wife after all, left for the city with a merchant's son. I have been too busy with the farm to look for anyone else since then. That was foolish of her. The simple declaration, stated as fact rather than flattery, made Peter smile. Maybe, or maybe she knew herself well enough to know she would be unhappy here. Either way, it worked out. I like the quiet. And now you have an orc woman in your home. Not so quiet anymore. No, Peter agreed. Not so quiet. Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the strangeness of their situation, perhaps, or the beginning of something neither wanted to name yet. The storm finally broke on the 5th day. Peter woke to sunlight streaming through his window and the sound of Kara moving around downstairs. When he came down, she was already dressed, standing by the door in her own clothes, now clean and dry. You are leaving, he said, and tried to ignore the sinking feeling in his chest. I should. You have been more than kind, but I cannot impose forever. Where will you go? Kara hesitated. South, I suppose. I heard there are towns along the coast that are more accepting of orcs. I can find work there, perhaps. That is weeks of travel, and winter is just starting. I know. Peter made a decision then that he had been circling around for days. Stay. She turned to look at him fully, surprise clear on her face. Stay through the winter, he continued. I have the space. And honestly, I could use the help. The farm is small, but it is a lot of work for one person. You can earn your keep if that matters to you. When spring comes, if you still want to go south, I will give you provisions and coin for the journey. Why would you do this? Kara asked, and her voice was almost angry. You do not know me. I am an orc. If your neighbors find out you are harboring me, they will turn on you. Then we will be careful. The nearest farm is 2 miles away. I do my own shopping in town. No one needs to know. Peter. I cannot force you to stay, he said, but I am asking, please, at least until spring. Kara stared at him for a long moment, those amber eyes searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she slowly reached up and unfastened her cloak. Until spring, she agreed. But I pull my weight, no charity. Agreed. So Kara stayed. The first few weeks were an adjustment for both of them. Peter was used to living alone, to the particular rhythms and routines of solitary life, and suddenly having another person in his space required adaptation. Kara, for her part, had to learn the workings of a human farm and navigate the strange new reality of living peacefully alongside a human. But they found their balance. Kara was strong, stronger than Peter had initially realized, and she took to the farm work with determination. She could haul hay bales that would have taken him 2 trips, could chop wood with efficiency that left him impressed. She had a way with the animals too, gentle despite her strength, and the goats and chickens seemed to accept her without fear. In the evenings, they fell into the habit of eating dinner together and then sitting by the fire. Sometimes they talked. Peter told her about growing up on this farm, about his parents who had passed from fever when he was 25, about the rhythms of planting and harvest. Kara spoke more carefully, sharing stories of orc life in fragments, tales of her childhood in the mountains, of clan gatherings and hunting parties. "We are not so different, orcs and humans," she said one night, watching the flames dance in the hearth. "We love, we fight, we laugh, we grieve. But we fear each other so much that we never see it." "I see it," Peter said quietly. She looked at him then, and the moment stretched between them, charged with something unspoken. The winter deepened. Snow piled high around the farm, and the world shrank to just the 2 of them and the steady work of survival. Peter taught Kara to bake bread, and she taught him orc songs that she hummed while working. They developed wordless patterns of cooperation, moving around each other in the kitchen or barn with the ease of practice. And slowly, without either of them quite meaning for it to happen, something shifted. Peter began to notice small things. The way Kara's face softened when she was amused, her tusks showing in a way that he found endearing. The sound of her laughter, rough and genuine. The surprising gentleness of her hands when she helped a goat through a difficult birth one frigid January night. He tried not to notice. Tried to keep his thoughts appropriate and his distance professional. But it was hard when she was there every day, competent and kind, when she teased him about his tendency to lose track of time when mending tools, when she fell asleep by the fire, and he had to drape a blanket over her, fighting the urge to brush a strand of hair from her face. Kara was having her own struggle, though Peter did not know it. She had not expected to feel at home in this small farmhouse, had not expected to feel anything for the human who had saved her life beyond gratitude. But Peter was unlike any man, human or orc, she had ever known. He was patient and thoughtful, quiet but not cold, strong without being domineering. He treated her as an equal, never seemed to see her green skin or tusks as something to fear or despise. And that was dangerous, because Kara could feel herself falling for him, and there was no future in that. Come spring, she would have to leave. That had been the agreement. She could not stay here forever hiding. Eventually, someone would find out and Peter would face consequences for harboring her. But oh, how she wanted to stay. The tension between them built slowly, like ice thickening on a pond. It was there in the moments their hands brushed as they worked side by side. In the way, Peter's gaze would linger on her before he looked away. In the careful distance, Kara maintained even as every instinct told her to move closer. February brought a brief thaw, and with it, a problem. Peter needed to go into town for supplies: flour, salt, nails, things that could not be put off any longer. He left Kara at the farm with instructions to stay inside if anyone approached, and made the journey into Millbrook with a sense of unease. The town was small, maybe 300 people, and everyone knew everyone else's business. Peter did his shopping quickly, exchanging pleasantries but not lingering. He was loading his purchases into the wagon when Horace Grayson, who owned the neighboring farm, approached him. "Peter, haven't seen you much this winter." "Been keeping busy," Peter said, arranging sacks of flour. "I bet, big farm for one man." Horace leaned against the wagon, his tone casual but his eyes calculating. Saw smoke from your chimney the other day. Seemed like a lot of smoke for just one person. Peter's hand stilled for just a fraction of a second before he continued working. I keep a good fire going. Cold this year. Sure is. Say, you haven't had any trouble with orcs, have you? Heard there's been some spotted in the area. Refugees from the mountain clans, they say. No trouble, Peter said shortly. Good, good. You let us know if you see anything. Can't be too careful. Orcs are dangerous, even the ones that seem peaceful. Peter bit back the sharp response that rose to his lips and simply nodded. He finished loading the wagon and got out of town as quickly as he could without seeming suspicious. When he got home, he found Kara pacing in the kitchen, anxiety clear on her face. Someone came by, she said immediately. An old woman selling herbs. I hid in the barn, but Peter, if she heard me, if she saw tracks, it is all right, Peter said, though his heart was pounding. Did she seem suspicious? I do not know, I do not think so, but Peter, this is exactly what I was afraid of. You are risking everything by keeping me here. I can handle a few suspicious neighbors. Can you? Kara turned to face him fully. Can you handle being called an orc lover, being shunned by your community, having your farm burned down because you helped me? It will not come to that. You do not know that. They stared at each other, and Peter saw real fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for him. Kara, he said gently, I made this choice with my eyes open. I am not going to throw you out because Horace Grayson is nosy. You should, it would be safer. For me, maybe, not for you. My safety is not your responsibility. Then why does it feel like it is? The words came out more intensely than Peter had intended, and they hung in the air between them. Kara's breath caught. Peter. I am not going to let anything happen to you, he said. We will be careful. We will make it to spring, and then you can decide what you want to do. But I am not making you leave. The silence that followed was thick with all the things neither of them was saying. Finally, Kara nodded just once and turned away, but something had changed. The words had been spoken, the truth laid bare between them, even if incompletely. And now it could not be taken back. March came in fierce, with late-season storms that kept them snowbound for days at a time. In the enforced closeness of the farmhouse, the tension became almost unbearable. Peter found himself watching Kara constantly, the way she moved, the sound of her voice, the rare smile that lit up her face. At night, lying alone in his bed, he imagined going to her, confessing everything he felt, but he held back. She had made it clear she intended to leave in the spring. He would not burden her with feelings she might not share. Kara was no better. She caught herself staring at Peter as he worked, memorizing the line of his shoulders, the careful way he handled the tools, the kindness in his eyes. She dreamed of him, woke flushed and aching, and hated herself for the weakness. She was orc. He was human. Such things did not work, but oh, how she wished they could. The break came on a cold evening in mid-March. They had been working together to repair a fence in the goat pen, Peter holding the boards while Kara hammered nails. When Kara's grip slipped and the hammer glanced off the nail and struck Peter's thumb, he yelped and jerked his hand back, and Kara dropped the hammer immediately, reaching for him. Let me see. I am so sorry, it is fine, Peter said through gritted teeth, but Kara was already cradling his hand in both of hers, examining the rapidly darkening bruise on his thumb. I am so clumsy. I was not paying attention, Kara. Truly, it is fine. I hurt you. It was an accident. But Kara was not listening. She pressed his hand to her chest over her heart, and Peter felt the rapid beat of it through his palm. When she looked up at him, there were tears in her amber eyes. I cannot do this anymore, she whispered. Do what? Pretend that I do not feel what I feel. Pretend that every day with you has not been a gift. Pretend that the thought of leaving in spring does not tear me apart." The words tumbled out in a rush, raw and desperate. "I am falling in love with you, Peter. And I know that is impossible and foolish and will only end in pain, but I cannot help it. You have been kinder to me than anyone in my life." And I, Peter, kissed her. He had not planned it, had not thought it through, but suddenly his free hand was cupping her face and his lips were on hers, and she was kissing him back with a hunger that matched his own. Her tusks pressed against his mouth, unfamiliar but not unpleasant, and when she made a small, desperate sound in the back of her throat, something in Peter's chest cracked open. They broke apart, both breathing hard, staring at each other. "I love you," Peter said. "I have been trying not to, but I do. I love you, Kara. I do not care what anyone else thinks. I do not care that you are orc and I am human. I just care about you." Kara's breath hitched, and then she was kissing him again, fierce and claiming, and Peter wrapped his arms around her and held on. They stumbled back into the barn, into the hay, hands tangling in clothing, mouths hungry and seeking. It was clumsy and desperate and perfect, and when they finally broke apart, both flushed and panting, Peter cradled her face in his hands. "Stay," he said. "Not just until spring. Stay forever." "Marry me." Kara's eyes went wide. "You cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious about anything in my life. Marry me, Kara. Let me spend my life with you." "Peter, they will never allow it. Human orc marriages are not recognized." "The town will turn on you, then we will go somewhere else. Or we will stay here and weather it. I do not care, I just want you." Tears were streaming down Kara's face now. "I want that too, more than anything. But Peter, if they find out, they could hurt you, they could kill you." "Then we will be careful." Peter kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "We will be smart about it, but I am not giving you up. Not now. Not ever if you will have me." "Of course I will have you," Kara said, laughing through her tears. "You ridiculous, wonderful man, yes. Yes, I will marry you." They sealed the promise with another kiss, softer this time, full of wonder and joy. And as they lay together in the hay, wrapped in each other's arms, they began to plan. It would have to be secret, at least at first. They could not have a public ceremony, but they could exchange vows between themselves, make promises before whatever gods cared to listen. Kara would continue to stay hidden when anyone approached the farm. Peter would maintain his reputation as a solitary farmer. And they would build a life together, quiet and hidden, but theirs. It was not perfect. It was not what either of them would have chosen in an ideal world, but it was possible, and that was enough. Spring arrived properly in April, bringing with it warmer winds and melting snow. The farm burst into activity, fields to be plowed, seeds to be planted, repairs to be made after the long winter. Peter and Kara worked side by side from dawn to dusk, and if their smiles were brighter than the season warranted, if they stole kisses in the barn and held hands while walking the fence line, well, there was no one around to see. On the first truly warm evening, when the sun set in streaks of gold and pink, they stood together in the pasture behind the house and exchanged vows. Peter had no ring to offer, but he had carved a small wooden pendant in the shape of an oak leaf, strong and enduring. He placed it around Kara's neck with trembling hands. "I promise to love you all my days," he said. "To stand with you against whatever comes. To build a life with you, hidden or not. You are my wife in my heart, and that is all that matters." Kara had fashioned a bracelet from braided leather and bits of green stone she had found in the fields. She tied it around Peter's wrist, her fingers steady even though her voice shook. "I promise to love you until my last breath, to be your partner in all things, to make this farm a home. You are my husband in my soul, and nothing can change that." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, and it felt sacred, more binding than any legal document could be. For a few precious weeks, life was almost perfect. They fell into the rhythms of married life, sharing a bed now instead of sleeping in separate rooms, waking tangled together in the gray dawn light. Kara's laugh rang through the house more often. Peter smiled constantly, even when he was alone, but their peace was not to last. It was Horace Grayson who brought their world crashing down. Peter had gone into town for supplies in late April, and perhaps he had been less careful than usual, buoyed by happiness and distracted by plans to surprise Kara with new fabric for a dress. He did not notice Horace following him home, did not notice the older man pausing his horse behind the tree line with a clear view of the farm. Horace saw Kara emerge from the barn, laughing at something. Saw Peter ride up and dismount, saw the way he embraced her, kissed her, the casual intimacy of a man with his wife, saw that she was green-skinned, tusked. Orc. Horace turned his horse around and rode straight back to town. Peter and Kara knew nothing of this until the next morning, when they woke to the sound of voices and horse hooves on the road leading to the farm. They rushed to the window and looked out to see a group of 20 men approaching, Horace at their head. Several carried torches despite the daylight. All of them looked angry. "Oh no," Kara breathed. "No, no, no. Go," Peter said immediately. "Out the back, take the horse. Ride for the southern road and do not stop. I am not leaving you, Kara. They will kill you if they find you here. They will kill you for harboring me." They stared at each other, and Peter saw his own terror reflected in her eyes. But there was no time. The crowd was already at the gate. "Peter Zimmerman." Horace's voice rang out. "We know you are harboring an orc. Send her out and we will consider mercy for you." Peter's jaw tightened. He looked at Kara, at the woman he had married in all the ways that mattered, and made his decision. "If I am going to face them, I face them with the truth," he said. "I am not ashamed of you. I am not ashamed of us." Peter, but he was already opening the door, stepping out onto the porch. Kara followed him a moment later, and together they faced the mob. The crowd fell silent, seeing them standing side by side. Then the muttering started, angry and hostile. "What is the meaning of this, Peter?" Horace demanded. "Have you lost your mind, an orc, in your home?" "Her name is Kara," Peter said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "She is my wife, and she has done nothing wrong." The statement sent a ripple of shock through the crowd. Several men actually took a step back, as if Peter had announced he had the plague. "Your wife." Horace's face was red with anger. "You married a monster, a savage. She is neither of those things. She is kind and hardworking and honorable. She has been helping me run this farm all winter. And yes, I married her. I love her." "This is abomination," someone shouted. "It is perversion. The orc has bewitched him." But there were a few voices that did not join the chorus of anger. A few men and women who looked uncertain, who glanced at each other with doubt in their eyes. One of them, a younger man named Thomas Vance, stepped forward. Peter knew him slightly. Thomas had bought a goat from him the previous fall. "Horace," Thomas said slowly, "I have known Peter for years. He is a good man. If he says this orc woman is harmless, she is an orc." Horace spat. "They are all dangerous. You cannot trust them." "I was freezing to death in the snow," Kara said suddenly, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "Peter found me and saved my life when he could have left me to die. He showed me kindness when I had known nothing but hatred from humans. He gave me shelter and food and asked nothing in return. I am not a threat to you. I just want to live in peace." "Lies," Horace said, but his voice was less certain now. "Orc lies. Look at me," Kara continued, descending the porch steps slowly, her hands out and open. "Really look at me. Do I look like a monster? I have worked this farm alongside Peter. I have tended animals and mended fences and harmed no one. I have been here for months, and not one of you knew because I was not raiding, was not attacking, was not doing any of the terrible things you fear orcs will do." She reached Peter's side and took his hand, facing the crowd with her head held high. "We are married," she said. "Whether you recognize it or not, and we are not leaving. This is our home. If you have a problem with that, you will have to burn it down with us inside." But I will not run, and neither will Peter. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, to everyone's surprise, an elderly woman at the back of the crowd spoke up. "Horace Grayson, you are a fool." All eyes turned to her. It was Martha Allen, the herb woman who had stopped by the farm months ago. She pushed her way through the crowd, her cane thumping against the ground. "I came by this farm in February," Martha said. "Heard someone moving in the barn, saw orc footprints in the snow. Did not say anything because it was not my business, but I have been watching since then, watching to see if there was any trouble, any sign of danger." She looked at Kara, then at Peter. "There was not. The farm has been peaceful, the animals are well tended. And when I sold my herbs in town, Peter always bought extra and left them on my doorstep with coin because he knows my eyes are failing and my daughter is ill. That is the kind of man he is. If he vouches for this orc woman, that is enough for me." But Horace started. "But nothing," Martha said sharply. "What crime have they committed? Falling in love, working hard, minding their own business. If every couple in this town was judged for being unusual, half of you would be run out." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. The anger was dissipating, replaced by uncertainty and, in some faces, shame. Thomas Vance spoke up again. "Martha is right. Peter has been a good neighbor. If he says the orc woman is safe, I believe him." Another voice chimed in, then another. Not everyone. Horace and several others still looked hostile, but enough that the mood had shifted. The mob was breaking apart, becoming just a group of confused, conflicted people. Peter felt Kara's hand tighten on his, felt her trembling slightly, and squeezed back. "I am not asking you to like it," Peter said. "I'm not even asking you to accept it. I am just asking you to leave us alone. We will not cause trouble. We will keep to ourselves. But this is our land, and Kara is my wife, and that is not changing." Horace looked around, saw that he had lost the support of the crowd, and his face twisted with anger. "You will regret this, Zimmerman. All of you will. Mark my words." He turned and stalked away, and after a moment, the others began to disperse as well, some reluctantly, some with apologetic glances at Peter and Kara. When they were finally alone again, Kara let out a shaky breath and sagged against Peter. "That was the most terrifying thing I have ever done," she said. "You were amazing." Peter kissed the top of her head. "So brave. We survived." "We did." But they both knew it was not over. Horace would not let this go easily, and there would be others who shared his views. Life had just gotten more complicated. Over the following weeks, the reality of their situation became clear. Some of the townspeople, like Martha Allen and Thomas Vance, accepted Peter and Kara's relationship, or at least tolerated it. They continued to trade with Peter, to exchange polite greetings when they passed on the road. But others, led by Horace, made their disapproval known. Peter found his fences vandalized one morning, cut in a dozen places. Someone left a dead rabbit on his doorstep with a threatening note. When he went into town, several people turned their backs or spat on the ground as he passed. Kara wanted to stay hidden, to avoid making things worse for Peter, but he refused to let her hide anymore. "We told them the truth," he said. "We are not going to slink around like we are ashamed. You are my wife. If people cannot handle that, it is their problem, not ours." So Kara began to accompany Peter on his trips to town, walking at his side with her head high despite the stares and whispers. It was hard. Every hostile glance felt like a knife. Every muttered insult made her want to retreat to the safety of the farm. But Peter was always there, steady and solid at her side, and that made it bearable. Slowly, very slowly, things began to change. It started small. Martha Allen stopped by one day with a basket of vegetables and spent an hour chatting with Kara about preserving techniques. Thomas Vance asked Peter's advice on breeding goats and treated Kara with polite respect when she contributed to the conversation. A few curious children, braver than their parents, approached Kara at the market and asked about her tusks, and she answered their questions with patience and humor. Not everyone warmed to them. There were still those who muttered about abomination, who crossed to the other side of the street when they saw Kara coming. But the overt hostility faded, replaced by a grudging tolerance. And then, in July, something happened that shifted the town's perception entirely. It started with a fire. The summer had been dry, and one afternoon, a spark from a forge in town caught on a thatched roof. Within minutes, the building was ablaze and the fire was spreading. The town had a volunteer fire brigade, but they were struggling to contain it, and several buildings were in danger. Peter and Kara were in town for supplies when it happened. They heard the alarm bells and saw the smoke, and without hesitation, both of them ran toward the fire. Kara's orc strength proved invaluable. She hauled buckets of water that 2 men would have struggled with, working tirelessly alongside the fire brigade. When part of a burning building collapsed, threatening to trap a family inside, Kara was the one who pulled the debris away with her bare hands, ignoring the burns on her palms, and Peter helped her pull the family to safety. They worked for hours, covered in soot and ash, until finally the fire was out and the town was saved. In the aftermath, as people surveyed the damage and counted their blessings that no one had died, they looked at Kara with new eyes. She stood among them, exhausted and injured, having risked her life for people who had called her monster. Mayor Edmund Taylor, an older man with a weathered face, approached them. He looked at Kara for a long moment, then extended his hand. "You saved lives today," he said. "Human lives. You did not have to. After how this town has treated you, no one would have blamed you for walking away, but you helped anyway. That is the mark of good character, no matter what race you are." Kara shook his hand, too tired to be anything but honest. "I helped because it was the right thing to do. Just like Peter helped me when I was freezing in the snow, I do not do good deeds for recognition. I do them because I want to be better than the hatred I have faced." The mayor nodded slowly. "I think we owe you an apology. The whole town does. You have proven yourself a dozen times over, and we have been slow to see it." "Some of us saw it all along," Martha Allen said, having appeared at the mayor's elbow. "The rest of you are just catching up." That drew a few sheepish laughs from the gathered crowd. From that day forward, things were different. Kara was not just tolerated in Millbrook, she was accepted. People greeted her by name. Shopkeepers served her without hesitation. Children waved when they saw her. She and Peter were invited to a town gathering in August, a harvest celebration, and they danced together under the stars while people cheered. It was not perfect. There were still occasional incidents, still people like Horace who would never accept an orc living among them. But those voices became increasingly isolated, drowned out by the majority who had decided to give Kara and Peter a chance. The farm thrived. With 2 of them working together, they expanded the vegetable garden, increased the goat herd, even began selling excess produce at the market. Kara had a natural talent for animal husbandry, and Peter's methodical planning skills complemented her instincts perfectly. In September, they hosted their first dinner guest, Thomas Vance and his wife Mary, who was pregnant with their first child. It was a little awkward at first, the human couple clearly nervous about what to say, but Kara's warmth and Peter's easy humor soon put them at ease. By the end of the evening, they were all laughing together, and Mary was asking Kara's advice on preparing for a baby. "I never thought I would see this," Kara said later that night as she and Peter prepared for bed. "Humans and orcs just talking, being friends." "Maybe you and I are not as impossible as we thought," Peter said, pulling her into his arms. "Maybe we are just the first." Autumn painted the world in gold and crimson, and Peter and Kara worked side by side to bring in the harvest. It was back-breaking work, but satisfying, and on the day they finished, they stood together in the barn and looked at the stores they had put by for winter more than Peter had ever managed alone. "We did well," Kara said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We did," Peter agreed, kissing her temple. "I have been thinking about next year. We could expand the north field, maybe get some pigs. We are doing well enough that we could afford it. Building for the future, are we? Our future." "Yes." Kara smiled and turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Peter Zimmerman." "I love you too, Kara Zimmerman." She laughed at that, the sound bright and joyful. They had never officially changed her name, had never had a legal marriage ceremony, but in every way that mattered. She was his wife and he was her husband. Winter came around again, but this year it held no fear for them. They were prepared, well stocked with food and firewood, and they faced the cold months together. On the long dark evenings they sat by the fire and told stories, made plans, dreamed of the future. Peter taught Kara to read and write, something she had never learned in the orc clans. She was a quick study, hungry for knowledge, and soon she was keeping the farm's accounts while Peter handled the physical ledgers in town. Kara taught Peter bits of orcish language, the guttural syllables that seemed harsh at first but revealed their own poetry when you understood them. She taught him orc songs and stories, the history of her people, and Peter listened with fascination. They were building something together, not just a farm or a marriage, but a bridge between two worlds that had been separated for too long. In December, a group of orc refugees passed near the farm, driven from their mountain homes by territorial disputes. Kara saw them from a distance and insisted they offer hospitality. Peter agreed without hesitation. The orcs' 3 women and 2 children were wary at first, shocked to find one of their own living peacefully with a human. But Kara welcomed them with open arms, and Peter made sure they had food and shelter for the night. Around the fire that evening, one of the orc women, an older warrior named Grisha, studied Peter with narrowed eyes. "You are the human who married Kara of Iron Peak," she said. It was not a question. "I am," Peter said. "We heard the stories, thought they were just tales, but here you are." "Here we are," Kara agreed, taking Peter's hand. Grisha looked at their joined hands for a long moment, then slowly smiled, her tusks gleaming. "Perhaps there is hope for our peoples yet. If you two can make it work, maybe others can too." The refugees moved on the next morning, but the encounter stayed with Peter and Kara. They were not just living their lives anymore, they were becoming a symbol, an example of what was possible. It was a heavy responsibility, but also a privilege. Spring returned, bringing with it the anniversary of the day Peter had found Kara in the snow. They marked it quietly, walking together to the spot near the fence line where he had first seen her crumpled in the drifts. "I was so cold," Kara murmured, staring at the now green grass. "I had given up, I was ready to die." "But you did not," Peter said. "You lived, you fought. You became my wife and my partner, and you made my life immeasurably better. We made each other better." They stood in silence for a moment, remembering, then turned and walked back to the farmhouse hand in hand. That afternoon, Mayor Taylor arrived at the farm with surprising news. The town council had voted to officially recognize Kara and Peter's marriage. It was unprecedented, the first legal human-orc marriage in the region, but after everything that had happened, the council agreed it was time. "You two have shown us that love does not see race or species," the mayor said, as he presented them with the official document. "You have worked hard, served your community, and proven that peaceful coexistence is possible. It is time we acknowledge that properly." Kara's hands trembled as she held the marriage certificate, her eyes bright with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you," the mayor corrected, "for being brave enough to live your truth, for showing us a better way." When he left, Kara and Peter held each other for a long time, overwhelmed by the moment. "We did it," Kara said. "We really did it. We are married, officially, legally." "We always were," Peter said. "But yes. Now everyone knows it." That summer, they received more unexpected visitors. A young human man and an orc woman, clearly in love but hiding it, heard about Peter and Kara and traveled for weeks to meet them. They wanted advice, wanted to know how to navigate a relationship in a world that did not approve. Peter and Kara welcomed them, shared their story, offered what wisdom they had gained. "It will not be easy," Kara told the young orc woman. "There will be people who hate you for what you are, for who you love, but there will also be people who support you. Focus on those. Build your own happiness and do not let anyone else's fear steal it from you. And be patient," Peter added. "Change does not happen overnight. We have been very lucky, but even so, it took time for people to come around. Give them that time, but do not compromise on what matters." The young couple left hopeful, and Peter and Kara watched them go with bittersweet feelings. "We are not just living our own story anymore," Kara observed. "We are becoming part of something bigger." "Is that all right?" Peter asked. "I know you never asked to be a symbol." Kara considered this, then nodded. "It is all right. If our happiness can help others find theirs, then the hardships were worth it." As years pass, though we focus on this first crucial period, Peter and Kara's farm became known as a safe haven. Orcs traveling through the region knew they could find welcome there. Humans who were curious about orcs, who wanted to overcome their prejudices, came to meet Kara and see for themselves that the stories of orc savagery were just that, stories. More mixed couples began to emerge, emboldened by Peter and Kara's example. It was slow and there was resistance, but the tide was turning. The barrier between orcs and humans, which had seemed insurmountable, was beginning to crack. In late autumn, nearly 2 years after Peter had found Kara in the snow, they sat together on the porch and watched the sun set over their fields. The harvest was in, the animals were settled, and the world was peaceful. "You ever regret it?" Kara asked quietly. "Choosing me? Making your life harder?" Peter turned to her, surprised. "Never, not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Kara. You made me braver. You made me better. You made me happy. I would choose you 1,000 times over, even though people still whisper. Even though Horace Grayson still glares at you in town. Even though our children, if we have them, will face prejudice their whole lives." Peter cupped her face gently. "Even though all of that, love is worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. Whatever challenges come, we will face them together, just like we always have." Kara leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. I never knew I could feel this way." "I know. I feel the same." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. The world felt large and full of possibility. "Peter," Kara said after a while. "Yes. Thank you for stopping that day, for not leaving me in the snow." Peter smiled and pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for staying, for choosing to build a life with me, for being brave enough to love across the divide. We were both brave." "Yes," Peter agreed, "we were." As autumn deepened into winter once more, Peter and Kara prepared for the cold months with practiced ease. But this year held a new development that filled them both with equal parts excitement and trepidation. Kara was pregnant. They discovered it in November, and the news left them both stunned. They had not been trying, had not even been sure it was possible for a human and orc to have children together, but nature, it seemed, had other plans. "A baby," Kara kept saying, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Peter asked, searching her face. "Yes, terrified, but yes. Are you the same?" They held each other, marveling at this new reality. A child, part human, part orc. A living symbol of their love and the future they were building. The pregnancy was not easy. Kara suffered from nausea and exhaustion in the early months, and Peter took on more of the farm work to let her rest. The town's doctor, an elderly man named Robert Holloway, agreed to attend to her, though he admitted he had no experience with mixed-race pregnancies. "We will figure it out together," he said, with the practicality of a man who had delivered hundreds of babies. "The basics are the same, no matter what." Martha Allen appointed herself Kara's midwife and came by regularly with herbal teas and advice. Mary Vance, now a mother herself, visited with her baby daughter and shared her own experiences. The women of Millbrook, who had once viewed Kara with suspicion, rallied around her during her pregnancy with genuine support. Even Horace Grayson, when he heard the news, seemed to soften slightly. He did not offer congratulations, but he stopped his overt hostility, and Peter counted that as progress. Winter was difficult, Kara's body struggling with the changes, but they weathered it together. Peter read to her in the evenings, rubbed her swollen feet, reassured her when she worried about the birth. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked one night, her voice small. "What if the baby is not healthy? What if I am not strong enough?" "You are the strongest person I know," Peter said firmly. "And whatever happens, we will face it together. You and me and our child. We are a family, Kara. We will be all right." Spring brought relief from the confined winter months, and Kara's spirits lifted as she was able to be outside again, feeling the sun on her face. Her belly grew round and pronounced, and Peter found himself constantly amazed by it, by the life they had created together. In May, on a warm afternoon, Kara went into labor. Peter had thought he was prepared. They had discussed the process, had supplies ready, had Martha and Dr. Holloway on standby. But when Kara's water broke and the contractions started, Peter found himself gripped by a terror unlike anything he had ever known. "It is all right," Kara told him through gritted teeth, even as pain contorted her face. "Women do this all the time. I will be fine." But as the hours wore on and the labor intensified, Peter was not so sure. Kara labored through the afternoon and into the evening, her strength waning, and Peter held her hand and whispered encouragements while feeling utterly helpless. Martha and Dr. Holloway worked with calm efficiency, but Peter saw the concerned glances they exchanged when they thought he was not looking. "The baby is large," the doctor murmured to Martha at one point. "Orc-sized. She is struggling." But Kara, even exhausted and in pain, was not ready to give up. As night fell and the moon rose outside the bedroom window, she gathered her strength for one final push. And then, suddenly, there was a new sound in the room, the thin, reedy wail of a newborn baby. "It is a girl," Martha said, her voice full of wonder as she lifted the infant. "You have a daughter." Peter felt tears streaming down his face as he looked at the baby, tiny and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and skin that was somewhere between Peter's pale tan and Kara's green. a sort of olive tone that was uniquely her own. She had her mother's pointed ears, small and delicate, but her father's nose. No tusks yet, though the doctor said they might develop later. She was perfect. Kara reached for her daughter with trembling arms, and Martha placed the baby on her chest. Mother and daughter looked at each other, and something profound passed between them. "Hello, little one," Kara whispered. "Welcome to the world." Peter knelt beside the bed, his arm around Kara, his hand gently touching his daughter's tiny fist. She wrapped her fingers around his, her grip surprisingly strong, and Peter felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "What should we name her?" Kara asked, looking up at Peter. They had discussed names, had several options ready, but suddenly Peter knew. "Hope," he said. "Let us name her Hope, because that is what she is. Hope for the future, hope that the world can change, hope that love is stronger than hate." Kara smiled, exhausted but radiant. "Hope Zimmerman, I love it." Little Hope's arrival sent ripples through the community. She was the first known human orc child in the region, perhaps in the world, and people were curious. Some were wary, uncertain what to make of this new development. But most were simply enchanted. When Peter brought Kara and Hope to town for the first time, a crowd gathered. People wanted to see the baby, wanted to offer congratulations, wanted to marvel at this tiny being who represented something entirely new. Hope, for her part, seemed unbothered by the attention. She slept peacefully in Kara's arms, her little face serene, and something about her innocence touched even the hardest hearts. "She is beautiful," Mary Vance said, peering at Hope with her own daughter on her hip. "Look at her tiny ears. She is absolutely precious." Even Mayor Taylor came to pay his respects, offering an official birth registration without hesitation. "She is a citizen of Millbrook," he declared. "Just like any other child born here, she will have all the same rights and protections." It was a small thing, perhaps, but it meant everything. As Hope grew, she became a fixture in the community. Peter and Kara brought her everywhere, to the market, to town gatherings, to visit neighbors. She was a happy baby, quick to smile, and people could not help but be charmed by her. Children especially were fascinated. They asked questions about her ears, her skin color, her half-orc heritage, and Hope, as she got older, answered with the matter-of-fact honesty of the very young. "My mama is an orc and my papa is a human," she would explain. "So I am both. It is not complicated." And really, it was not. Not to Hope, who knew nothing but love from both her parents, who grew up in a community that accepted her. She was living proof that the divide between orcs and humans was not insurmountable, that new generations did not have to carry the prejudices of the old. By the time Hope was 2 years old, there were 3 other mixed couples in the area, and talk of more. The world was changing, slowly but surely, and Peter and Kara had helped change it. They never sought recognition for this. They simply lived their lives, raised their daughter, worked their farm, and treated everyone with kindness. But their example mattered, and they knew it. One evening, when Hope was tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Peter and Kara sat together on the porch as they often did, watching the stars emerge. "You remember the first time we sat here together?" Peter asked. "Years ago, when you told me you could not pretend anymore." "When everything changed, I remember," Kara said. "I was so frightened. I thought I was going to lose you, that admitting my feelings would drive you away. I was frightened too, but we were brave. We were." Kara leaned her head on his shoulder. "And look at us now. Married, legal, and recognized. Parents to a beautiful daughter, accepted by our community. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe it is real. It is real. We made it real, together." They sat in comfortable silence, the years of shared life between them evident in the ease of their presence together. They had faced so much prejudice, Anger, fear, danger, but they had faced it together, and that had made all the difference. "I love you," Kara said softly. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Peter replied, tilting her face up to kiss her. "Forever and always." Inside, hope stirred in her sleep and murmured something, then settled again. Outside, the world continued its slow turn, full of possibility and change. Peter and Kara had started with a simple act of kindness, a man finding a dying woman in the snow and choosing to save her rather than leave her. From that single choice, an entire life had blossomed. Love, marriage, family, community, hope for the future. It had not been easy. There had been struggles and setbacks, moments of fear and doubt. But there had also been joy and laughter, connection and growth. They had built something beautiful together, something that would outlast them both. As the years continued to unfold, hope growing into a bright, curious child, the farm expanding and thriving, more mixed families forming in the region, Peter and Kara remained at the center of it all. Not as leaders or heroes, but simply as two people who loved each other and refused to let the world's prejudices dictate their happiness. They grew older together, their love deepening with time. They faced new challenges as they arose: a bad harvest one year, illness another, the normal trials of life, but they faced them together, their bond unshakable. Hope grew up strong and confident, aware of her heritage and proud of both sides. She became a bridge herself, moving easily between human and orc communities, making friends everywhere she went. She carried her parents' legacy forward, showing by her very existence that unity was possible. Other children followed, not for Peter and Kara. Hope remained their only child, but for other mixed couples. Each new baby was a victory, a sign that the world was moving forward. And people looked to Peter and Kara, the couple who had started it all, with respect and gratitude. When Hope turned 7, the family took a trip to the city, farther south than any of them had ever been. There, they found an entire community of mixed families, orcs and humans living together in harmony. The movement that Peter and Kara had helped start in their small rural town had spread, grown, become something larger than themselves. "Look what you started," Kara said to Peter as they walked through the diverse crowds, Hope skipping ahead of them. "What we started," Peter corrected. "I just found you in the snow. You did the hard part. You were brave enough to trust me, to love me, to build a life with me despite everything." "We were both brave," Kara said, echoing words from years ago. "And we will continue to be, for Hope and for all the others who will come after." They returned home to their farm, to the life they had built, and continued on. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. The seasons cycled through their eternal pattern. The farm prospered. Hope grew taller. And through it all, Peter and Kara loved each other with a devotion that never wavered. On their 10th anniversary, counted from that first kiss in the barn, the moment they had admitted their feelings, they renewed their vows in a proper ceremony. This time in the Millbrook Town Square, with the entire community as witnesses. Martha Allen officiated, her voice strong despite her advancing age. "Peter and Kara," she said, "you have shown us what true love looks like. Love that crosses boundaries. Love that perseveres through hardship. Love that changes the world. It is an honor to stand here today and officially recognize what everyone here already knows, that you two are meant to be together, and that your love is a blessing to us all." Peter and Kara spoke their vows again, the words even more meaningful now after a decade of proving them true. "I promise to love you through every season," Peter said, his voice thick with emotion. "Through every challenge, through every joy. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. I am grateful every single day that I found you in the snow. I promise to stand with you always, Kara said, tears streaming down her green cheeks. To build our life together, to raise our daughter with love and strength. You saved my life once, but you have given me so much more than that. You gave me a home, a family, a future. I love you more than words can express. They kissed as the crowd cheered, and Hope, standing between them, laughed with pure delight. The celebration lasted all day and into the evening, with music and dancing and abundant food. Humans and orcs mingled freely, the barrier between them nearly dissolved. Children of all backgrounds played together. It was a glimpse of the future they were building, and it was beautiful. As the party wound down and people began to drift home, Peter and Kara stood together at the edge of the square, watching the last dancers sway in the firelight. "We did it," Kara said quietly. "We really did it. We changed things." "We did," Peter agreed. "But more importantly, we found happiness. Together. That is what matters most." They walked home through the quiet night, Hope drowsing between them, each parent holding one of her small hands. The farmhouse glowed in the distance, welcoming them back. This was home. This was family. This was love. And it all started because one winter evening, a farmer had found an orc woman freezing in the snow and made the choice to save her. Everything that came after the love, the struggle, the triumph, the family, the change they brought to their world, all of it flowed from that single act of compassion. Peter Zimmerman had shocked the town not just by warming the orc girl who was freezing to death, but by falling in love with her, by marrying her, by building a life with her that proved love knows no boundaries. And in doing so, he had not only saved Kara's life. He had changed the world. Years later, when Hope was grown with children of her own, she would tell the story to her grandchildren. The story of how her father had found her mother dying in the snow, how he had saved her life, how they had fallen in love despite the prejudice and fear that surrounded them, how they had faced down angry mobs and built a farm and a family and a future together. And those grandchildren would understand that love, real love, is not easy. It requires courage and sacrifice and unwavering commitment. But it is worth it. Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of fear worth it for the joy and connection and meaning that love brings. Peter and Kara lived long lives, side by side, their love never dimming. They grew old together on the farm they had built, surrounded by family and friends, part of a community they had helped transform. And when their time finally came, many years after that fateful winter night, they passed peacefully, hands clasped, surrounded by love. Their legacy lived on in Hope, in her children, in the countless mixed families that came after them, in the changed world they had helped create. They had proven that the divide between orc and human was not a chasm that could not be crossed, but merely a space that required a bridge. And they had been that bridge. But if you had asked them in those final peaceful days what their greatest accomplishment was, they would not have spoken of social change or breaking barriers. They would have simply said, "We loved each other. We built a life together. We were happy, and really, what more could anyone ask for?" The story of Peter and Kara, the farmer and the orc woman who shocked the town and changed the world, became legend. But at its heart, it was simply a love story. A story of two people who found each other against all odds, who chose each other despite the world's objections, who built something beautiful and lasting together. It was a story of hope, a story of courage, a story of love triumphant. And it all began on a cold winter evening when a kind man made the choice to save a dying woman's life, and in doing so, found his own life transformed forever. Their farmhouse still stands, passed down through generations, a monument to the love that started there. And sometimes, on quiet winter evenings, if you listen carefully, You can almost hear echoes of that first night, the crackling of the fire, the whispered promises, the beginning of something extraordinary. That is the story of Peter and Kara Zimmerman, and how one act of compassion in the snow changed everything. It is a story that deserves to be remembered, told and retold, so that others might find the courage to build their own bridges, to love across divides, to choose compassion over fear. Because in the end, that is what changes the world. Not grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but simple choices made with love. One person seeing another's suffering and choosing to help. One heart opening to another despite all the reasons it should stay closed. Peter found Kara in the snow and saved her life. And she, in turn, saved his not from death, but from loneliness, from a half-lived life, from never knowing the profound joy of true partnership. They saved each other. They loved each other. They changed the world. And that, truly, is the happiest ending anyone could hope for.